Greg Arms is no stranger to the number one sports ground. He's led Newcastle on many occasions, amassing more than 3,000 runs from 106 games. With a record like that, he was the obvious choice of captain for the Hunters Invitation 11.
We're looking forward to it. It's the combination of some older Newcastle blokes with some new blokes who are playing state cricket and our current state players.
The team to meet Pakistan was announced today. Among the players, star opener Michael Slater, crowd drawcard Murph Hughes, up-and-coming pace bowler Newcastle's Anthony Stewart and New South Wales captain Greg Matthews. Adding local influence will be Wallsend's Greg Geese, current Newcastle captain Steve Story, keeper Simon Moore, while Herbert will carry the drinks. For Geese, it's another cap in a long and proud career. Yesterday, he was bashing sixes and fours at the Wallsend 15-over series. He hopes to continue that form against the tourists.
I'd like to put one over the fence if I could.
We had plenty of practice yesterday.
Certainly did.
That shower of runs will hopefully continue when the sides clash on Monday the 30th of December. Jonathan Upton, NBN News.
Despite their differences, these children from Hillsborough Primary and Glendon Special School have become good friends over the past couple of years. In fact, they are best buddies. They're taking part in a program known as the Buddy System, which links students from the two schools, allowing them to share lunchtimes and some class time together. Year 5 students at Hillsborough came up with the idea last year, and teacher Christine Wetham says it's breaking down barriers.
The growth in their tolerance, particularly, their care and concern, compassion, all of those things I think, and definitely the growth in self-esteem and maturity and responsibility of the children.
It's hoped the children's acceptance of people with disabilities will spread into the wider community.
We get a great deal of friendship out of the buddy scheme.
It's good because how you grab a great deal of friendship and vast amount of understanding and everything. You get lots of understanding with them.
Meanwhile, one young Hillsborough student has just written a special book. 7-year-old Jordan Ball suffers from spina bifida and, with the help of his teacher, has put together a story called The Boy with Spina Bifida to help explain.
Because some people didn't quite understand about spina bifida that much.
And today he was the centre of attention. Emma Ossian, NBN News.
Clayton Zane was jumping out of his skin today as he continues to climb the ladder of soccer success. The striker has been selected in the Young Socceroos team that's trying to qualify for next year's World Youth Championship in Malaysia. The first hurdle, the Oceanic Playoffs in Tahiti at the end of the month.
So 2 years ago, this was my aim. So I'm halfway there. Hopefully I'll be there at the final thing, but still a long way off. I don't like to count my chickens before they hatch.
It's a meteoric rise for the youngster, who's gone from Cessnock second grade to National League first grade in just a few years. He attributes much of that success to the Breakers and coach John Cosmina, but Newcastle is realistic about its chances of keeping the rising star.
No, as long as if the right offer comes along, we'll sell anybody. Money speaks all languages, doesn't it, at this level?
Unfortunately, one of Zane's former Australian Institute of Sport teammates, Tari Steve Lupton, was forced to watch from the grandstand. A cruciate ligament injury has forced the 17-year-old onto the sidelines. His National League debut postponed by 6 months. But no injury concerns for Newcastle against competition leader Sydney United at Breakers Stadium tomorrow night. Jason Bennett returns to the starting lineup. Andy Roberts will take the place of Glenn Moore, who's been dropped to the youth team. Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
Australia-France tests always inspire top-class rugby, and it should be no different in 1997. The French arrive in Australia early June. They'll play 2 test matches against the Wallabies and another game against an Australian 15. That will be played in Newcastle.
Obviously, with an Australian 15, you've got the fringe players who'll be trying to knock the blokes off that are in the test team to get them out of the road for the games later in the year.
Local rugby officials are still negotiating whether June 24 game will be played among consideration Marathon and Breaker stadiums. Meantime, negotiations are complete for what will be a new-look Newcastle Rugby Union for next season. Muswellbrook has been accepted into the First Division competition, bringing to 9 the number of teams contesting the title.
We see that Muswellbrook's an area for development of the code. Obviously, they're going to have a few problems with strength.
The club will field 3 teams in the league, with the competition set to kick off the first weekend after Easter. Jonathan Upton, NBN News. The Breakers were always the underdogs, united the competition leaders Newcastle without a win since round 1, but the locals were causing plenty of problems for the Ericsson Cup favourites. Bodies were put on the line as both teams fought for possession. Sydney did most of the first half attacking, Scott Thomas the saviour for the Breakers, while at the other end of the park, Troy Halpin kept the visitors on guard. 0-0 at the change, coach John Kosmina was facing yet another draw, but Sydney United had other ideas, Ante Milicic breaking the deadlock. It wasn't the Christmas wish local fans were hoping for. Some were calling for a legendary effort. Clayton Zane almost delivered. Then 30 seconds later, the visitors fumbled from the corner and Shane Price brought the match back to level terms. It was as if they'd won already, but the celebrations only got bigger when Clayton Zane was brought down soon after. The young Socceroo replied perfectly to bring the bench to their feet again. The naked truth was starting to hit home for Sydney. Down 2-1, they were running out of time and facing their first defeat of the season. Another lapse in defence, and there was no doubt of the result. For once, the missed goals didn't matter, Newcastle causing the biggest boil-over of the season, winning 3-1. It started as a marvellous night for baseball fans at Marathon Stadium, but Eagles supporters didn't have too much to cheer about after the first couple of innings. The Eagles trailed for the entire game, down 2-0 at the bottom of the 4th. But there were indications the Hunter would bounce back, American import Fletcher Bates leading the charge. Errors in the field took their toll as the visitors went on to record a 6-2 victory. The second game was much the same. The Bandits scored 1 batter home in the first, 2 in the third and 1 in the fourth for a 4-0 win. Games 3 and 4 of the series started moments ago.
It was a hive of activity at this warehouse in Cardiff as dozens of volunteers brought the Christmas spirit to life. The colourful boxes were packed with food, drink and other gifts, all aiming to make the festive season more cheerful for the growing number of needy people.
And what we try and do is find and focus on the people who are maybe slipping through the social welfare net, so to speak.
The generosity of the local companies who donated the goods was matched only by the enthusiasm of the volunteers. Organisers say the aim is to encourage others to help themselves.
We're trying to say, hey, someone's gone to the trouble to help you. Maybe you might like to take some first steps yourself.
The boxes will be handed out during the next few days.
3:12.1 the time. Our Big Monty returned $8 even and $2.50 for the win. The 15-metre handicap was too much for Rifleman. It paid $1.30 and $5.60 for Heatherlock's Last. The 5.9 Quinella paid $9 even and the trifecta $2.95.90. Race 7 was the Christmas Wish Pace. Milwaukee Squaw the favourite. $8 and $2.70 for Hop Harrigan, $3.80 for Dale's Romeo and Casino Mate got there for $30, paid $8 even. The Quinella almost $50 and the trifecta more than $1,400.
The US team arrived to check out the Newcastle track this morning, picking up a speeding fine along the way. The team of John Saws, Steve Francis, Charlie Swartz and Clint Smith is out to quash the Aussies, who beat them in every test last year. The small Newcastle track has proven a thorn in the side of the Americans, so have the local drivers.
The cars here at Newcastle seem to be a little quicker than any other place in Australia, and the drivers are just a little better, so the competition is just here more like it is at home for us, you know.
Charlie Swartz has a long association with Newcastle. He's been competing here since the early 80s, but an ugly incident with an official saw him banned.
I kind of thought I was a boxer partly, you know, instead of a race driver, and I kind of liked that as well as I did racing at the time, and he kept giving me a little problem, so I finally did what I wasn't supposed to do, and it became a pretty good mess here that night.
It's a formidable Aussie lineup though, captained by John Pine with John Brown, Alan Baker and Ron Pine. Engines start at 7:30 on Thursday. Blake Doyle, NBN News.
Greetings, friends. A holy and blessed Christmas to you. What if God is one of us? One of the top songs in Australia's top 20 is a song which goes on to say, God is good, God is great. And then it asks a rather strange question, what if God is one of us, a slob like one of us? Someone who has no hope, no direction, nothing going right in life. Do we feel sometimes at Christmas that we are slobs? Do we look at other people, those who are on the margins of society, and say, well, maybe they are slobs? Well, the truth is that God has become one of us at Christmas time. And because God is one of us, none of us is a slob. God treats us with unique wonder and respect, awe and joy. And because God treats us in that way at Christmas, we need to treat each other, and in fact God's world, with the same degree of respect and joy. You know, at Christmas time, God goes out of his way all the way for us. And perhaps the greatest message of Christmas is that we need to go out of our way, some of the way for others. Remember, none of us is a slob in God's eyes. In Christ, we have become the greatest joy for God and for this earth. May God's continuing grace be with you now and into 1997.
As Christmas Day draws near, most of us are preparing to celebrate with family and friends and exchange gifts and be filled with the joy of Christmas. But at the same time, there's been that sense of it being a tough year through 1996. A number of issues have cropped up in the course of our year, which have caused great concern, such as the Port Arthur massacre and the subsequent gun debate, euthanasia and racism. And these sorts of issues have caused concern, and as well as the continuing violence that seems to exist within the society in which we live, with youth suicide and muggings and road rage and home invasions. These sorts of things cause me concern at any rate. And I'm sure that as Christmas arises, we wonder what Christmas has to say to these kinds of events. But I think it helps get our priorities right when we realise that God breaks into our ordered, scientific and often very tense world to show us that there is love and that there is the promise of peace. And God does that in the form of a little baby born in the stable at Bethlehem, a kind of helplessness that reaches out to us, and God invites us to share that love with one another. So the message of Christmas is that we try to respond to the violence and the fragmentation in our community by exercising our love for each other. And the hope would be that all of the violence would be minimised if enough of us did that. But I wish you a very happy and a peaceful Christmas this year.
The end of school doesn't just mean holidays for children, it can also mean hospitals, with too many youngsters ending up in bed rather than the beach. Christmas time turns into danger time, with more children injured than any other time of the year. Just 2 days ago, 2 young teenage boys were badly burnt at this house at Macquarie Hills near Cardiff, when a homemade bomb blew up in their faces.
Christmas is a really bad period for injury with young children, and older ones as well.
Parents are being urged to be extra vigilant during the silly season. KidSafe says it's okay to let your hair down, just don't let your guard down.
I think kids will always experiment, but I think it's a time when we're all very busy and we're distracted. We're in holiday mode, and we've usually got a lot of friends and visitors and family around, and we tend to let our guard down a little bit on what the kids are doing.
But children also have to play their part.
That they've got to wear their safety gear. They've got to wear their helmets and their knee and elbow pads, and make sure that they have that on every time.
Richard O'Leary, NBN News. The jockey of Mr Neslow may have claimed the race, but it was Shane Dyer aboard Century Boy who got the money, paying $7.70 and $3. The trifecta nearly $1,300. Racing was also at Caulfield, another test for the Stays, this time over 1,800 metres. A grand win for a grand old campaigner. He paid $6.20 and $2.20, the trifecta $121.70.
The number 1 sports ground is in tip-top condition. Ground staff have been working around the clock to have the pitch in the right condition. The outfield is fast, the wicket perfect for one-day cricket, and with some of the world's best to be in action, local organisers expect at least 8,000 fans to attend.
I think we'll get a really good response on Monday. The forecast was quite good, and we're pretty excited about what's going to happen.
For both camps, Monday's clash is more than a tour match. Among that 8,000-strong crowd will be national selectors.
I'm sure, particularly with the Hunter Invitational, there are a few young blokes on that side who'll be keen to, impress again. Particularly Anthony Stewart, who's been doing very well, and of course Anthony Daly and Shane Lee.
Both the Hunter Invitation and Pakistan teams arrive in Newcastle on Sunday. The first ball of the one-dayer will be bowled Monday at 10.
The doors opened and the frenzy began. Shoppers pushing their way to get the best of the post-Christmas bargains. The big department stores opened their doors at 8 o'clock this morning, hoping for a few days of big trading.
Sales for the first few hours this morning are up on last year, which is very pleasing. We've had the customers come out from 8 o'clock and take advantage of all the bargains and specials around the store.
Manchester and underwear drew the largest crowds, but in any case, patience was the key.
You know there's going to be a lot of people here, so you've got to be prepared to put in the time and wait if you want the bargain.
Parking difficulties didn't seem to deter shoppers. It's a time customers look forward to each year.
So we usually come up each year and try to get a few bargains.
The sales are great. We're getting what we want. Love the sales. Don't we, Margaret?
The electric arc furnace proposal is among a number of mooted steelmaking projects for Newcastle. Unlike most, the Aussteel furnace would not be dependent on BHP's future plans.
It is in its preliminary stages and they will make judgments. They haven't been back to us, but at the end of the day they'll make a judgment on its commercial viability, but they will certainly be given every encouragement.
Indications are the Aussteel Group is angling for a range of government-sponsored incentives such as cheap electricity. The Hunter could face stiff competition from Victoria and West Australia. The government says it won't be drawn into a bidding war.
At the end of the day, it's the taxpayer that pays for these things. In a country as large as ours and as diverse, it seems ludicrous that each of the states are trying to outbid each other.
Mr Face says the company is looking at two possible sites in the Hunter, Kooragang Island and another near a power station. He believes Kooragang Island is the perfect location.
It may well be that they're looking around at what incentives each state will give. We have some natural assets, as I said, that will make the Hunter attractive without actually having to commit any monetary contribution at all.
The plane reported difficulties at around 10 a.m, the pilot calling in to say the landing gear had failed to come down. Emergency crews were put on standby at Rutherford Airport and the Westpac rescue helicopter called in when it was feared the plane would have to make an emergency landing. But after a few tense moments, it was discovered the landing gear was down and that the lights in the cockpit had just malfunctioned. The plane then landed safely. Meanwhile, there was an air difficulty of a different kind at around 1 o'clock when a paraglider got into trouble at Mungo Brush north of Tea Gardens. He crashed, hitting the side of a boat and was flown to the John Hunter Hospital suffering ankle and rib injuries. Emma Ossian, NBN News.
Come midnight tonight, the party will be close to over and thousands will start to head home. Traditionally, demands on public transport are at their highest early on New Year's morning, with spirited revellers looking for a lift home. The Newcastle buses fleet is at the ready to bear the burden of passengers, adding extra services.
Operating our normal weekday services. We have our night-hour services on top of that. That's our late-night services that run through all the night until tomorrow morning on all major routes. And on top of that, overlaid on that, we're going to have about 100 additional trips running.
For those making the trip from Stockton, the ferry service will be extended until 2 a.m. It's also a busy time for the city's taxis. The entire fleet of 160 cars will be on the road to help ease the load. Demand is expected to far exceed supply.
Be patient. They might not get through the first time, but just keep trying.
Meanwhile, the focus of celebrations on the Central Coast will be at Terrigal. 40 police officers have been brought in to patrol the beachfront, which is expected to attract around 15,000 people. In keeping with the family atmosphere, all entertainment areas have been designated alcohol-free. The night will climax with fireworks at midnight. The robber started around 3 o'clock this afternoon, stealing a Holden Commodore wagon from this car yard in Hamilton. He then turned his attention on the National Australia Bank in Hunter Street West. He entered the premises waving a black handgun and demanding money. Staff quickly activated security screens, thwarting the robbery. The man left via a lane next to the bank to the stolen car. 5 other people inside the bank were interviewed by detectives. Minutes later, the getaway car was located in an underground car park in the junction. It's being checked for fingerprints. Police are searching for a tall man aged around 30, last seen dressed in dark overalls and wearing a light blue balaclava. Blake Doyle, NBN News.
"15 knots is by no means the strongest wind, but at least it gave competitors in the VS national titles on Lake Macquarie something to work with. For the opening heat, sailors have battled calm conditions. Today in round 5 of the championships, Spinnakers at last had a chance to fly. 30 crews are contesting this year's title at the South Lake Macquarie Amateur Sailing Club. Sydney-based VS Thurler Fisher is leading the way, while local boats are also faring well. Dale Jacobson, Lindsay Austin and John Hodds and their craft Advantage Personnel is currently second overall. Today's heats produce more top-class sailing, as well as the odd near miss. Competition concludes Saturday. Meantime, further up the lake at Turalba, Heat 3 of the Australian VJ and Skate Championships. After winning the first 2 races in the skates, Dave Luck and Any Which Way was again headed in the right direction and aiming for victory number 3, while the rest of the fleet did their best to catch him. In the VJs, Joel Castle's Loaded Weapon leads the juniors, Bruce Eltoft's Red Thunder the seniors. And at Tanilba Bay Sailing Club in Port Stephens, the Australian International A-Division Catamaran Association is also holding its nationals. Competing in this year's event, current world champion Glenn Ashby and Olympic Games silver medalist Andrew Landenberg.
While the weather didn't provide for a full day of sun, sand and surf, it didn't stop people enjoying the time left with family and friends. Whether it was picnicking in the park or strolling along the foreshore, people made the most of the first day of 1997. Some preferred a friendly game of cricket or soccer, while others enjoyed scenes from the harbour. New Year's Day allowed time to catch a peek at some of the latest box office movies.
We're seeing Space Jam at the theatre today now.
Some have vowed happiness, success and money the aim of 1997, but others will be happy with something a little closer to home.
I think not to wear socks twice after they're dirty. That's about it, really.
Newcastle Bight is one of the largest undeveloped land areas remaining on the New South Wales coast. The 60,000 hectare site has been earmarked by the state government for national park status, a promise environment groups say hasn't been honoured.
It's terribly important for the state government to come in now and make it a national park like they promised before the last state election.
The Parks and Playgrounds movement has joined other coastal groups calling for government action. The move comes just weeks after the Port Stephens Council gave the go-ahead to BHP to commence sand mining operation on the site.
It really is a crisis point, I'd say, in that we have to wait too long to have these sort of areas put in national park.
An appeal against the BHP sand mining operation will go before the Land and Environment Court next month. In the meantime, coastal groups will meet in Sydney next week, calling for Newcastle Bight to be made a national park. Vanessa Spark, NBN News. The warm waters entice thousands of sharks south at this time every year.
Migrational path brings them along our coastline, and depending on the sea action at the time, whether they come in close or they stay further out to sea.
Travelling with their young, they'll often stay close to the coast for several weeks until they're strong enough to make the rest of the journey. The fish travel in schools of 200 or 300, making them easy to spot for lifeguards.
We alert each other as they're coming along, and we just take the obvious actions that we have to, either closing the beach, warning the public, or just going out in the rubber ducks and keeping an eye on them.
With plenty of feed available at the moment, lifeguards hope the sharks won't be a problem for swimmers.
Well, Newcastle was amazing last year. Per capita, they were the most successful city in the whole of Australia. We got nearly 1 million cards, nearly 5 tonnes of cards just from Newcastle.